Would you like me to get everything to me?
Is everybody in? Taylor wants. Let's get started. Nothing like turn your house into a church, it feels like. This is a little odd. We picked this day because this would have been Mom and Dad's. I don't feel like I've shed a tear since my mother died, and this feels emotional. It's so nice of you all to come. This would have been my Mom and Dad's 77th wedding anniversary. It's today. They didn't make it, but it's okay.
They made 61.
They are both in this urn together, and Janet said, did you put an encyclopedia in there so they could argue about who was right? I did not, but anyway, but we can. Anyway, I know I've already forgotten what I was going to say. Yes, but thank you. My mother would have been overwhelmed with all of you coming. She would have been so happy that we were all. It's my Aunt Irma, which you all didn't know, a lot of you didn't know. She died 37 years ago. My mother outlived her by that. My boss, Graham, who was here, my dad said my mother didn't have much stamina, and Graham said, well, I guess he proved her wrong. So anyway, my dad, when you guys, a lot of you came to that funeral, I said my dad would have given you the shirt off of his back. My mom, not so much. She would have taken the shirt off of your back because she was always cold. But she would have given it back as soon as she wore it up. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my mom's sister, Liz. And after Liz speaks, then my niece, Sonia, who is the oldest grandchild, she gets to do the floor. So go ahead. Thank you for coming.
It's Joy not talking.
It's you. Joy,
You know, we had so much fun last night talking and commiserating about our lives together and who is who and who did what and when. Now, I have been told I have 10 minutes, so I have to talk fast. Please do not interrupt. Somebody set a timer. Okay. So, before we talk about Elfriede, I think it's important for some of you to understand what her life was like. Now, you know that her parents came from Germany in 1923, and they married shortly after that. And Elfriede was born in 1924, just a day or two ago.
Yeah.
4 years later, Sister Irma was born. But Elfriede was an only child for 4 years, and she relished in being an only child. Now, I frequently, as I remember her, often think of her as being Queen Bee.
Yep.
Now, if you have any ancestors that you remember who came from Europe, you know that there was a lot of custom behind it. You were next to God if you were the oldest son, and you inherited everything. If you were the oldest daughter, you were next to being queen because you probably had an arranged marriage to find, and your parents tried to find the most eligible man they could find because families took care of families. And so they wanted to make sure that they had a son-in-law who could take care of them. Daughter number 2, less important. Daughter number 3, that would be me.
Yep.
Less important than that. And Joy, I'm sorry to say, you would be last on the totem. Remember, this was the What was that?
She said that's fine.
doesn't talk.
But the important thing is she still held on to this idea that she was next to the Queen. So growing up as a child of German immigrants who lived in primarily a Danish community was tough. My parents were not rich, but they had this huge garden behind them, and they raised cabbages, not corn because Dad didn't like corn, cucumbers, carrots, pumpkins, on down the line. And as a child, I can remember this huge root cellar where things were stored. The not so much fun things were that Irma and Fred and Elfriede got to pull a wagon around the neighborhood and around town and try and sell some of those vegetables.
Oh my God. Got to.
Yeah. And Elfriede, this is a secret, maybe her daughters know, she did not know how to cook when she got married. And as a child growing up, she was always had her nose in a book. And Irma learned to cook. So Irma was the cook in the family. Mother never learned to cook either. 2 generations of people who can't cook. So besides that, Dad was German. And what was happening in the world? Well, you remember what happened on December 7th, 1941. Elfriede would have been a senior in high school. She would have graduated the next June. So the U.S. was at war with the Japanese, first of all. 4 days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the U.S. Can you imagine having the audacity to declare war on us? But there had to have been a reason for it, because they figured if Pearl Harbor had been bombed and many of our vessels sunk or destroyed, what chance did they have of winning the war? So let's go for it. Let's get them on 2 fronts. So that was the life she grew up. Now, at some point in time, Dad probably asked for everything that he got. On the day that Hitler and his troops invaded and took over Denmark, Dad went up through town and said, "Now you Danes will know what the good life is like."
Oh my!
No kidding. So it's little wonder that the FBI came knocking at their door. And that's the truth. Now you want to hear that story? Some of you heard it last night. Yes or no?
Yes.
You don't
More,
need it
yes.
again. So they really came knocking at the door. And Dad, of course, being a very generous person, and Mother invited them in. She prepared coffee and cookies and served them. And Dad finally said, "Why are you here?" Now they lived in a little town of maybe 1,500 people at max. There was no industry in this little town. None.
Other than
Farming.
Farming, but nothing of military importance. So why were they there? Because somebody had contacted them, because supposedly he was sending messages to Hitler. And he had a car, and gasoline was rationed. So most people had their cars up on blocks to protect the tires, and gas was rationed, so that even if they tried to drive their car, gas was slow to get. And of course, sugar and chocolate and other things were rationed too. So there was no reason why they should have been there. So they sat and had their coffee, asked if they could see the house, asked if they could see the basement, went to the basement, asked if they could see the attic. So Dad got out the ladder, showed them up to the attic. There was nothing there. No technology, no phones, nothing. And I can remember this and asked if I could also climb up the ladder to look at the end. You can imagine that.
Oh, yeah. It probably wasn't a place he'd let you go.
That's right. So the FBI said, thank you very much for the coffee, and they went on their way, and that was the end of that.
Wow. That is crazy.
Now, Dad also alienated other people to the point where he continued his membership at First English Lutheran Church. My mother, every time she went to church, our pastor, who yet shall be remain unnamed, proceeded to talk about the Nazis and the Germans and the war and whatever. So Mother went to the German Lutheran Church. We went to the First English with Dad sometimes, or sometimes with the German Lutheran. So back to Elfriede and Irma and Fred. They had to live with this man who said, now you will know what the good life is like. To the point where Brother Fred, who was probably as arrogant, if not more so, as my dad. I hope I didn't offend anybody.
She's not wrong.
But his nickname was Little Hitler.
Oh, dear.
So here's poor Elfriede, poor Irma, and living with two men like that. And my mother, after I was born, had one nervous breakdown. And after she found out that I was pregnant and she gave birth to me, she said, I won't raise one child alone, I'll raise two. Now her friends thought she was crazy. So this is what Elfriede had to look forward to. A new baby sister in her senior year in high school.
Yes.
So she graduated, she went up to Minnesota, and like many of the young women in this country, her age, went to work at airplane manufacturing firms, missile manufacturing, ammunition firms, whatever it was that needed to support the war. Remember somebody called, what was her name? Rosie Riveter?
Yeah.
Okay, Rosie Riveter wore coveralls to work and the bandanas. You've probably seen the pictures.
Yeah.
Well, what happened after World War II when it came to an end? You think those women wanted to give up their jobs? Hell no! They wanted to work. And they wanted to be able to wear pants. Now, it took a long time before pants or slacks or whatever you want to call them became appropriate attire. So Elfriede gets married after the war. Don, and I should mention this, it's my understanding, girls correct me if I'm wrong, that Don had applied for admission to South Dakota State University and was allowed to begin school, but then faced either the draft and go to war or to declare that he was needed at home to help farm. And his parents were able to complete the paperwork, so Don had to drop out of school, never to return, and went home to help farm. When he got married, he and Elfriede moved to a farm. Now remember, she couldn't cook.
Dad said she could burn water.
Okay, so she moved into this house. Now in the little house that we lived at the time, we did have running water, although there was a pump in the porch outside the back door. We had a toilet in the basement, but we had no bathtubs and no showers. And we had this huge garden. So Elfriede moves out to this farm. When the house was fixed up, there was running water put into the sink in the kitchen, period. There was a well right outside, which frequently did not fill by Mother Nature, so they would have water hauled in. There was no electricity. They used kerosene lanterns. There was no telephone to begin with. And then they finally had party lines. You've heard about the party lines. One of my memories about her living on the farm after not knowing how to cook is her chasing a chicken that was loose in the yard, catching the chicken, chopping off the head, plucking the feathers, gutting the chicken, cutting it up, and fixing this delicious home fried chicken. No, she went from not knowing anything to fixing that. So life continued for her. Probably the next life-changing event was when our mother died. And my mother said to one of the sisters, I don't know which one it was, you know, Dad wouldn't be a very good father to these little girls. So I would like you, Elfriede and Irma, each to take one and raise them.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, hell no!
Wow.
I will raise my children, you raise yours. But we had two substitute mothers who stayed and helped. We went shopping, and the biggest thing we got a big kick out of was when the clerk would say, no, I think you need to ask your mother if you can buy these shoes or buy this dress. She's not our mother, she's our sister. So it was primarily up to Elfriede, who taught us how to wash and curl our hair. Now, I used to cry unless my pin curls were absolutely perfect. I can't do this, I can't do this. Joy, forgive me. Hers looked like a rat's nest because it was pulled up like this.
I was going to tell that story.
Bobby pin stuck in. I'm not taking it out, I'm not doing it over, it's good enough.
That's the truth.
So not only did she have to help raise us through the good and the hilarious times, but she was a good role model. She could sew beautifully, and she taught both, and Irma helped her too, taught both of us to sew. We made a lot of our own clothes. She learned to cook. She became an active member in the community. She went to a lot of organizations where she learned to cook, and I think she was a good mother to her daughters. But this is important to know because life was not easy for her. She never got to college, and one day we had this conversation, and she said, I know that Irma went to school to be a nurse, and Fred went to college for several years, and you graduated from South Dakota State, and Joy went to Mankato. I didn't get to do any of that. And I said, wait a minute. I wasn't old enough to know what was offered to you, but remember, you had 4 other siblings, and I know that the parents believed that what we do for one, we have to do for all. So something was offered to her, I'm not too sure what, but she declined. Later, I have to say, she didn't have a college degree, but she was so well read. And if she didn't know the answer and couldn't find it, she did. So she was probably better educated than a lot of other people her age.
Because she went to the encyclopedia so many times.
Wherever she got
She had to be right. Even if she wasn't right, she was part right.
So she may have had a trying beginning, but she did the best with what she had to offer. So the floor is yours.
Yes, will you guys play your song first, please?
Rich is gonna, my brother-in-law Rich and my sister Ruth, they're gonna play a song that they liked that was kind of when Mom died, it was kind of this song that they.
Last year, my wife and I were in a musical called Bright Star. It was written by Steve Martin. And one of the songs was about a lady that had passed away right at the beginning of the play. And it reminded us so much because she passed when we were in the middle of doing this play. And we thought it was appropriate, and it's called She's Gone. Well, maybe you will have that.
We had a visitor while you were away. Unwelcome as he was, he came on in one day. He sat down quietly at your mother's side. She left with him sometime in the night. She's gone. You know how much he loved your son. She had no fear of death. She went on peacefully. She just closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep. She's gone. She's gone. You know how much he loved you, son. Let's walk on over there and lay a rose upon her grave. She's gone. She's gone. You know how much he loved you, son.
Beautiful, Rich. Thank you.
I'm ready for my life to
Sorry.
I'm ready for it.
Before I start, does anybody else want to get up and say anything about Grandma? No? Okay. Oh my God. This is what happens when you turn 50 plus. God.
Really?
Yeah. Hi.
There one of these days.
I gotta take these glasses off so I can actually see all of my family up here. This is kind of cool. Hi, Devin. I love you. I'm gonna start off by saying May the 4th be with you. Today is May 4th, which is a nod to our favorite Star Wars. So, I want to start off too by saying very much thank you to Sarah and her family and Bob and everybody that was here to help and host this. This is a huge undertaking. So thank you, because you guys have put so much effort into this and so much care and concern, so it's a big deal, and thank you very much.
Grandma would have loved it.
She would have, seriously. And I want to say thank you for everybody being here, because Grandma would have loved this. It would have made her feel so amazing that you guys were all here. Okay, I want to start today by saying how special it is for us to all be here in honor of my beloved Grandma Elfriede. Some of us did come from far and wide to truly celebrate this quirky unicorn of a woman. This is going to be a bit long-winded. I love you. I had that written before you gave me my parameters. So, please grab something to drink and get comfortable, because I'm sure that this is going to be a minute for those of you guys that didn't know her very well. I'm going to take you on a ride through her life. This was written in a book by her. It's about, would you say it's about this big?
Oh yeah.
The last
It's 4 inches thick.
Seriously, the last 10 years of her life, this book was something that was so important to her. And she talked about this to my mom 1,000,001 times and basically came to me and said, can you please make copies of this for all of my children, because it's so important that they have a copy of this. It meant a lot to her because writing was something that was beautiful for her and she wanted to share that. But going through it, I was like, oh my God. I mean, I knew my grandma very, very well, but I learned so much more about her life through this book. So this is really appropriate, and I'm going to start off with one of the things I found in this book, and it's really appropriate for today. It is called Sing Me No Sad Songs. She wrote it on 3/16 of 93. It says, here I am stuck on this topic of funerals. Funerals? Now who could write anything upbeat about a funeral? Admittedly, a funeral is a time to say goodbye to a loved one or a friend. But why does a funeral have to be a somber affair with dreary songs and mournful eulogies? When I go, I want everyone to remember the event as a celebration of a life well lived. And I hope those left behind will think of me with kind and loving thoughts. But no weeping, please. Or at least could you keep it to a minimum? Plan to have songs, lots of songs. Good, singable, joyous songs with spirit and pep. Please don't be surprised, because if I can manage it somehow, you will hear me singing along with you. Louder than every single one of you. That is not a lie. Remember the good times we shared, the holidays when we gathered together, the birth of a child, the anniversaries and birthdays we celebrated. There were times, of course, when we suffered unexpected loss to the death of a parent or a daughter or sister, or when a hailstorm obliterated our whole crop for the year. But I like to think we survived these awful times with determination to go on, not to let such calamities drag us down into defeat, but instead make us stronger to face the ups and downs of life. Someone once wrote a line, sing me no sad songs, and I share that thought. Let me go on a shining day with clouds flying in the wind, birds singing on the wing, and the fragrance of flowers in the air. And let me go with things still left to do, so that those who follow after would pick up the threads of life and go on, thankful for the time we spent together. See, the woman basically wrote her own, right there. She just basically wrote today, so I think that's really cool. I'm going to paraphrase this. Basically, you gave us a lot, and thank you. Elfriede Christine Bruchmann was born on Monday, September 15, 1924. She was the first of 5 children born to German immigrants, Arthur and Louise Bruchmann. She used to tell me stories of her siblings, Irma and Freddie, and the fun they would create out of their common names as a family. She loved learning how to sew from her mother and would strive to make her father proud with her good grades in school. She avidly recalled being teased relentlessly of being German descent. One of her favorite memories was being given a lead role in a school program. The teacher wanted her to wear a pretty dress, but hers was one of more practicality. So her teacher painted her face with cheeks with rouge and lips with lipstick. And boy, did Elfriede look fancy.
She told me she tried to keep her face from being washed for days after so she could keep the paint that opened the door to her imagination. She always thought she was a plain girl. She described herself as a lass who barely smiled, and often she was a mystery to herself. A wish for her gray eyes in her elfin face and hair that curled only a tiny bit to not be so very plain. Their family were devout Lutheran, and she maintained that as her faith her whole life. She started at First English Lutheran and moved to Danebog when she married my grandpa Don. She loved her family dearly and went on a childhood airplane ride with her father and cherished a little dollhouse he made from scrap wood for her and Irma while working in a hardware store. She met my grandpa in primary school. It is my understanding they were friends from then forward. She graduated high school in 1942 during the height of World War II and then went on to work for Northwest Airlines to convert B-24 planes from bombers to reconnaissance camera planes until VJ Day in August of 1945. That's not too bad for a young human woman in the first third of the 1900s. Now let's get serious for a moment and discuss her faith in God. As I stated earlier, she claimed Lutheran as her faith base. She truly revolved around Danabode, from teaching Sunday school to ladies' aid groups. She was the secretary for Danabode for years, furiously typing the bulletin for regular services, funerals, weddings, and confirmations. She was the star soprano in the choir. So proud she was to sing her high-flying voice above everyone else, so high that Jesus Christ himself would only have to dip a finger down to touch her. My immediate family have several fond memories and many laughs from all of us trying to imitate her at Christmas with her renditions of Angels We Have Heard on High. Anyone who knew her knew how proud she was of her vocal abilities. I begged her and Grandpa to let me come with them to church on Sundays. Their rule was I had to walk to their house and then we would all go. If I was really lucky, we stopped at the drive-in for lunch and ice cream after, and Grandpa always needed the paper. She loved the dancing and singing and crafts. She used to get such a joy from me taking a week each June to come up and stay with them for folk camp. And I'd kept up this tradition well into my 30s, and those are some of my fondest memories of the legacy she created at Danabode. It occurred to me that without a religious officiant present today, really all of the Bible verses I chose are more for the comfort of us who are here versus her. Here are my two favorites, 1 Corinthians 15, verses 42 through 45. And so it shall be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown perishable, it is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, and is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, and then it is raised in power. It is sown into a natural body, and is raised into a spiritual body. Next will be Revelations 21, verse 4. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Another one of her writings created a form of a storyboard for her marriage, almost as if her mother had a plan for her eldest daughter, and was paraphrased into the epic point in which a woman looks back on the legacy she and Grandpa created for themselves. This is titled An Epitaph for Us. Mother said, "Marry him. He comes from a good family, and besides, they have money. But we married for love and shared special, precious times. It never mattered that we didn't have much, except healthy children, a cozy home, good friends, important things like that. We buried one child in sorrow, but watched the others grow, achieve, marry, and give us grandchildren. Together we survived the tough, lean times, found peace and content in the good times. Our living, our reputation, our happiness, we earned all of those. If ever anyone thought his family was special, they never mentioned it to me. And from that day to this, I've never seen a single extra golden penny." As many of you know, today would have been their 77th wedding anniversary, and this year of 2024 would have seen them both reach the century mark of age. So there are many things to celebrate today. Their romance started as friends, which is the best and most solid foundation for any marriage. It would seem that this small town, self-proclaimed plain girl found a resolute sort of peace and understanding of taking all her worldly experiences and turning them into finding joy in becoming a farmer's wife, a mother of 5 beautiful daughters, and a romance that, from my perspective, was one formed in the ease of comfortability in routine. Don't misunderstand me. This book fully unfolded an epic romance between them, but it was honest as well. They lived in a farmhouse without power, running water, or a toilet and shower for many years. Imagine this today, if you will. I mean, every day we turn on our showers and have running hot water, and that is something we all take for granted. But they did it with the grit of times. She wrote this with a sense of gratitude for every lesson and blessing they achieved, but they did it together and raised their girls with so much love. She had a full essay on how they chose the names of each of their girls, and should they have been blessed with a boy, his name would have been Glenn. They happily took care of her 2 younger sisters, Liz and Joy, and she spoke of farming together, spending time with both of their families, learning life from each other. They faced the greatest heartbreak any parent or couple could have to bear in the loss of their oldest daughter, Lorene, in 1964. She was only 16 years old, and her whole life was ahead of her, and in an instant, she was gone. I know so many couples in today's world who would not be able to navigate this tragedy together, but in true Elfriede and Donald form, they did their best to get through this for themselves and the girls, and they did this together. When they bought their house in town at an auction, she wrote of them bidding on it and discussing their budget together. And that's what I was always shown by them, the power of truly having your best friend by your side through all the good times and the times that broke their hearts. I used to love going to the fair or out to eat with them. They most often sat right next to one another, and I loved how she would casually place her pretty hand on his arm as an easy show of his love language of physical touch. Now, as best friends, they were also fiercely competitive with each other. If you were ever at their house around dinner time, you would hear them shouting the answers to Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy to see who could answer it first. They would always try to beat the other at African rummy, in singing, bidding at auctions, and even in their later passion of acting in theater productions. I took this in as a child, into a young adult, and even further into womanhood as them trying to bring out the best in the other. Isn't that what a beloved does for the ones that they love? And when it was their 50th anniversary, they renewed their wedding vows at Danabode. I remember him being giddy with excitement to surprise her. He was a soft, romantic-hearted man, and she was that, his queen. This seems a funny image for farmers and gladiola growers, but that's how I saw them. Theirs was the community home, given they stayed as a home base in Tyler, Minnesota for all of us. And Christmas was a must in our immediate family. Some of my favorite memories are of how special they made Christmas Eve. Church, dinner, singing, homemade gifts from Grandpa, presents, sleeping slumber party style on the floor. And now that I'm 50 years old, I don't think I could actually do that anymore. I love the attic treasures Brooke, Amber, and I would find to give as joke gifts. And trust me, that attic was like stepping through a door into a fantasy world of the woven tapestry of their lives. I cleaned out and sorted everything in that attic the summer we got the house ready to sell. It took about 5 weekends and 12 hours a day. Because if you did not know this about Elfriede, she never threw anything away. Here I will be reading her longest essay of today, titled Crazy Mixed Up Love Affair, and this one depicts this as if she were an all-seeing oracle. This is written in February of 1986. I can see them already, my 4 grown daughters, going through my drawers and cupboards and boxes after I'm gone, sorting and throwing out and wondering, why the hell did Mom save all this stuff, they'll ask one another. They won't have an answer because neither do I. You see, I'm a collector and a hoarder and a saver. Just the other day, I was looking for something in a drawer of my buffet. Safely tucked into a corner of the same drawer was one of my collections, a copy of every Hallmark date book since the year of 1967. You know what I mean. Those handy little books with space on each calendar date to jot down an important appointment, birthday, or event. It's so convenient to keep one in your purse, provided you remember to look at it again in time. I can't really tell you why I started collecting these little date books, but I'm sure I'll keep on saving them yet for a while. Who knows? They may become valuable someday, especially those from our country's bicentennial year. The best thing about this collection, though, is that it didn't cost me a thing. You can pick up a free copy of the current date book at almost any store that sells greeting cards. And they're small. Even a bunch of them doesn't take up much room, which is more than I can say about some of my other collections. One of my favorite pastimes is going to rummage sales. One day, a long time ago, I bought a small red glass vase at a sale for 10 cents. I love red glass vases. They're so beautiful set in a window where the sun can shine through them. So over the years, at rummage sales and auction sales too, but not always at such bargain prices, I've managed to accumulate a few red vases of various shapes and sizes. Also, some green vases and some blue vases and some of a few other colors as well. Now, one of my cupboards is filled to overflowing, and I have enough vases for every windowsill in my house. I'm not sure if my daughters liked red vases, but they will have plenty to choose from if they need any for Christmas or Valentine's Day. I also save pennies, or at least I did some years ago when I was trying to collect 1 penny of every series minted since the year 1909. That's when the first Lincoln penny was struck. Have you ever looked closely at a penny? Just below the date on each coin, you will find a mini mark. If you find a letter D, the penny was minted in Denver. If you find an S, it was minted in San Francisco. If it has no letter at all, it was minted in Philadelphia. Therefore, there are at least 3 pennies to save for each year. Now, you would think with all the pennies that a person gets in change, it would be easy to find all the pennies you needed. Not so. Some pennies are very rare, depending on how many were made that year. My collection album still has many holes in it today because I learned in a hurry that it would cost a lot more than 1 cent apiece to acquire these missing coins. I'm not very interested in collecting pennies anymore. It just got too expensive. Nowadays, I drop all the pennies that come my way into a jar to save for a hot game of Tripoli. And with my luck, there won't be many for my daughters to have to divide. Do you save boxes? I do. In fact, one whole corner of my attic is nothing but boxes. All kinds of little boxes neatly tucked inside a bunch of big boxes, in case I need one for wrapping a birthday or a Christmas gift. I just can't stand to throw a good box away. Every year at Christmas, after we've opened our gifts, I gather all the boxes up again. In fact, I'm sure I've used some of those boxes at least 3 or 4 times over. One consolation, my daughters won't have far to look for something handy when it comes to hauling out my junk. Wouldn't it be nice if that were all the junk my girls had to go through? Unfortunately, there's more, and lots more. Some of it is not too bad though. For instance, I have enough Kleenex and toilet paper stuffed into my bathroom closet to take care of whatever needs wiping for the next year. On the other hand, there's a drawer in my kitchen just bulging, with brown paper sacks, plastic bread wrappers, and empty margarine tubs. Up in my attic, in a big cardboard box, is a stack of old newspapers, and I mean old newspapers. Each of my daughters will find a copy of the Tyler paper that noted the event of her birth. And they'll find some old St. Paul papers telling about the end of World War II. There's even a bunch of papers featuring the killing of the Ruthven bankers in our neighborhood a few years ago. You know where these papers will end up? Out on the curb for the local paper drive. And I am so sentimental, I've saved all the scripts and programs from every play I've been in at the Lake Benton Opera House. They will make for a splendid bonfire. I'm not through yet, though. Once I was into flower arranging a lot, and I thought wicker baskets were just the thing. Later it was teapots and tea kettles. Now all of them are gathering dust in my basement. Remember when blue fruit jars were all the rage and glass telephone insulators? Call me if you're interested. Oh yes, I have a marvelous library of craft books for all the things like Indian beadwork, decorate with shells, macrame, etc. Most of these books are as good as new, and one of these days I plan to dig out our old Christmas cards from the last 30 years and reread them all again. Isn't it amazing how much a house can hold? If you think this is the end of my collections, you're wrong. It's just a good start. And you may be wondering why I don't get rid of some of this stuff myself. The truth is, I've had so much fun collecting it all, I'm not ready to part with it yet. Well, I hope I have a few more healthy years left, but when I am gone, you may need to come and help my daughters. I know they'll be busy, and I'm sure you'll all have a good time. Meanwhile, please excuse me now. I think I heard of a good rummage sale somewhere in the neighborhood, and I must go check it out. That's a serious thing. That's truth. Okay, let's see where it was. I think one of my favorite Christmas memories was the year we took one of her moon pictures off the wall and wrapped it for her. She was so excited to get a new one. Once we were all done with the presents, she asked Grandpa to help her find a spot on the wall for it. So funny was the look on her face when she stood in front of that wall and there was a space perfect for that picture right in the middle of the wall. When she got it, we all just died laughing, and in fact it still makes me laugh just seeing that look on her face. They successfully had 2 businesses together, the farm and growing the gladiolas, and they taught me how to be a good business owner. I do fully understand how rewarding and challenging that can be today. And they did this together. Then came the ill-fated day where he got sick. They went to every appointment, every radiation, and when it seemed like there was a real hope for a successful surgery, his life was cut short unexpectedly. And then she had to try to navigate a life they had built all by herself. I'm going to give my grandma a ton of props here. She did it even when she was scared and lonely and hurting. She put on that grit and determination, put her head down, and tried with all her might. But when it was obvious to all of us that she needed to go to assisted living at Dana Bode, she fought back. When she finally went, she realized how in making yet another huge change there could be joy. I do believe she was boy crazy her whole life. She has always loved her son-in-laws and the attention they gave her. Once in Dana Bode assisted living, she met her boyfriend Charlie. He was a funny little man who always wore a bow tie and suspenders and had the goofiest little laugh. He loved taking her on dates in his BMW, which filled her desire to feel fancy yet once again. He made her feel special, which was such a precious gift after all the big changes she had endured in the couple of years leading up to this moment of her life. And isn't that what we all want, to feel special? After Charlie passed, her memory started to fade even farther away from the sharp-witted lady we all knew and loved. In many of the visits my own father Paul would make to her, she thought he was her next suitor, and her boy crazy even gave her the ability to remember meeting my spouse Toby as knowing he came to see only her and that he was wearing her beloved color of red on a man, which she thought was so sporty. The loss of her eyesight, hearing, and memory gave her daughters a large choice on her behalf. My mom, Janet, had the appropriate home and lifestyle that would be able to have her live with them to transition into her final chapter in life. So for the first time in her life, she was not a Minnesota resident. She tried her best to keep pushing forward with my mom, but her physicality was waning, and once my mom found out about her own breast cancer, the girls were faced with the one decision Grandma never wanted them to have to make. The nursing home was the best choice, no matter their feelings or hers on the subject. This chapter was the one in which I heard the most interesting stories from her, such as she telling me that she and I were part alien because of our both long, skinny fingers, and that I was going to sell my salon to take her on a safari so she could ride a giraffe. If I never learned another thing in my life from her, the best of all the lessons was that one's imagination is their greatest gift. That is the place of dreams and hopes and wishes and goals and all the places we can go if we only open the door to what is the deepest, beautiful recesses our minds can create for us. Her legacy is this and beyond. She was an avid reader and an accomplished writer, as I have selected and read for you today. She was active in a writers group called the Night Writers. She truly wanted people to know she was an excellent student in school, but I feel her greatest achievement as a student was one of simply living a life. She was a top soprano in choir. She was a wonderful seamstress and taught each one of her daughters to sew. She created beautiful needlepoint creations and loved competing in 4-H for her flowers at the Lincoln County Fair. Her favorite theater role she played was Yenta from Fiddler on the Roof. She was a good mom to her girls, Lorene, Marie, Janet, Ruthie, and Sarah, and an incredible grandma to Amber, Patrick, Brooke, Nick, Taylor, and myself. She was a cherished wife to a beloved man. She was smart, funny, and witty. She seemed to make magic in everything she touched. She could use her creative imagination to make even the simplest things into a huge adventure. She was frugal in the way anyone who lived through the Great Depression would be, and she would always ask if we were saving our shekels. Honestly, she would only allow us to use 4 squares of toilet paper for a bathroom visit, which prompted all of us to buy the Costco mega packs of toilet paper anytime we came up to visit. She got joy out of introducing you to a baby chick or a kitten on the farm, and then in teaching all of us how to harvest the acre of gladiolas. She seemed to have a vault of knowledge in her pinky finger, and was most happy when she was sharing that with anyone who would listen. After a valiant fight with dementia, she passed peacefully from this life on August 26th of 1923. She was 2 weeks shy of her 99th birthday. The last time I saw her, she told me she wanted to live to 100, and that wish was cut short. I will miss her skin that was as soft as vellum paper, and that she wore every piece of her sparkly jewelry at one time, enough to rival any modern-day rap star. I will miss her potato salad and her rhubarb pudding, her Spritz cookies at Christmas, and her favorite soft-boiled eggs. Most of all, I will miss her quirky nature and her cackling laugh that gave all of us the giggles in this life. We are all here today to celebrate her in whatever slice of your life where she fit in and touched you the most. In her own words, she was a daughter, sister, wife, aunt, a lover, a mother, defense worker for the war, a homemaker, daughter-in-law, student, teacher, saver, chauffeur, co-worker, a neighbor, a friend, a listener, counselor, a caregiver to elderly parents, a gardener, mother-in-law, grandmother, secretary, author, and much later in her outstanding life, she finally became a great-grandmother to Devon. But to me, she will always be my beloved, goofy, magic grandma. And what an extraordinary life she lived.
Howdy. Hello.
Make her feel more comfortable. But you know, when someone has
Usually because they're banned. It actually hurts them. Small man at the end. Which sucks though. You guys get anything there? Or
I got one. Unhappy hair, and it says I can't curl. I don't want to do anything. Oh well, yeah.
I probably look as much